First, quickly, is a misnomer. It took 4 centuries for Christianity to take hold in Rome, and about 10 to fully take hold throughout the European, Western world. Christianity was the religion of the dispossessed before Constantine. It was popular among the slaves, former slaves, immigrants, and refugees in the Roman Empire, the people legally or effectively barred from being full citizens. It validated their existence and struggles in a way that Roman paganism did not. The Roman pagan religion operated very differently than we today understand the reason for religions to be. Keeping the pagan religion was kind of like paying insurance premiums. You gave tribute to the various gods, usually you favored one or two of them. In return they would see to it that you'd be protected from bad fortune, which was usually brought about by the vicissitudes of other gods. You didn't worship those gods in the way we conceive of worshipping in Christianity or Islam today. You paid dues. The pagan religion glorified wealth. The wealthier you were, the more ostentatious your displays for the gods were supposed to be. Giving to the gods meant doing things like putting on circuses or gladiator games if you were rich. Putting on an annual feast for your neighborhood if you were less rich, etc. The pagan religion did not focus on personal behavior or comportment, it hardly addressed that at all. Rather, it concerned itself with process. Did you pray to the right God for the right thing at the right time with the right words? If a storm ruined your crop, it was because you must have not prayed quite right a couple weeks ago. The insurance company won't pay out if you didn't fill out the right claim form or buy the right policy. Putting on a feast or building a bathhouse meant you pleased the gods, and your wealth was a sign you were doing everything right in life. You were supposed to display that. If you were not wealthy or at least affluent, you were not of much value. Christianity turned that on its head and said that the rich are actually in spiritual danger because of their misplaced priorities. It said that liars, hypocrites, cheaters and debauchers would have to answer in the next world to a higher authority, one that knew what was truly in their heart. For Christianity, small, not publicly seen values were what mattered, like humility, diligence, steadfastness, faithfulness, forgiveness. What was in your heart mattered. Regardless of who you were or what you could do in this world, it all paled in comparison to the faith in your heart, proof to the authority in the next world that you were the one who was right all along. That would be rewarded with something beyond the ken of worldly goods and concerns. It shouldn't be a surprise that the dispossessed people in the empire would be attracted to a religion that valued them. First, when it began, Christianity offered something new, something no one else did or ever had. It's a little hard for us to comprehend how different the world was before Christianity. We swim in the sea of a Christianized Western culture whose revolutionary ideas are now taken for granted even by non-Christians. But there was a time when Christianity spread because these ideas were new and changing the world one life at a time. Christianity spread because it has always been evangelistic. Women talked in the marketplace and men spoke together in synagogue, and that was incredibly effective. Countless individual decisions were made that added up to a profound cultural change that eventually spread across the whole empire. Part of the power of these new ideas was because of the conditions of life at the time. Citizens of Rome were generally better off than most of the rest of the world, but in spite of all the glories of the Roman Empire, people lived in gross inequality. The masses lived in great poverty while there was immense wealth in the hands of a very few. Romans believed a person's fate was deserved, whatever it was, so there was no concern for the poor out of a sense of common humanity. Even with the many sicknesses, diseases, and plagues that spread like coronavirus through the population, there were no public health services in the Roman Empire. Romans did occasionally donate to public works to raise their social standing, but there was no organized charity for the poor. Romans would have been appalled at the idea, in fact they were when Christians started practicing it. Doctors were expensive. Very often the only alternative to starvation in the event of being unable to pay, whatever the cause, was to sell yourself and/or your family into slavery to pay your debts. Sexual mores, political clout, business contracts and even marital arrangements were all determined by your social position in Roman Empire. It was considered morally acceptable for upper-class men to sexually abuse their slaves because slaves, Being on the bottom of society had no social position, and to a Roman that meant they had no capacity for moral thought. They were things. Romans weren't even convinced women were people in the same way noble men were. Part of the power of the new Christian ideas was because of conditions of life, but part of their power was in the ideas themselves. The Christian community taught and genuinely practiced, there is neither Jew nor Greek, neither male nor female, neither slave nor free. They pooled their resources, and took care of each other in unprecedented ways. Christianity cared for the poor and built the first hospitals aimed specifically at helping those without the means to help themselves. They allowed women a freedom and power no one else ever had. One of the earliest extra-biblical references to Christianity we have mentions 2 women slaves who were deacons in their local church. We have a register of the church at Rome dating to the year 251. They had a number of people that they catalogued, 46 presbyters, 7 of this and 7 of that. Quite a lot of people are in this catalog. At the end of the register it says over 1,500 widows, along with other needy persons, are on the roster as being supported by the church there. This gave widows the freedom not to marry, since under Roman law, widows were required to remarry within 2 years of their husband's death. Church members bought slaves just to set them free. They taught people that there was no authority above God, not even Caesar. They said God had declared that every human life had value to him, even a slave's life, and he had demonstrated that, himself, by coming to earth, being crucified in human form, and rising from the dead. Christians talked about this God who loves, a God who loves enough that he would send his very son into the world. Never mind how odd the notion of God having a son was to the Jews who began this movement, because there it is, the Christian story is a story of a God who calls upon people to exercise a similar kind of love that he himself has demonstrated, a love which is manifested in this death for others, the death of the Son of God. It was a revolutionary concept, an ideology of love instead of power. Love your neighbor as yourself, which must also mean love yourself, and love your wife, and your children, and your brothers and sisters in Christ, and oddly, even your enemies. This was a new message, a rather improbable message. Romans were familiar with stories of the gods coming to earth and leaving behind half-human progeny, but none of them claimed it was because those gods cared about mankind.